Hello and welcome to the podcast from Diggers and Dreamers, the organisation that's been the face of communal living in Britain since the 1980s. Whatever kind of intentional community you're interested in, whether it's communes, co-ops, co-housing or anything else, Diggers and Dreamers is where you begin. And now, here's our podcast host, Kirsten Stevens-Wood.
Our guest for this podcast is Cath Muller. Cath has been involved in the British cooperative movement for over 30 years, living at Cornerstone, Leeds, and working for Footprint Cooperative, as well as being heavily involved in Radical Roots, a mutual aid network of co-ops committed to working for radical change. Today, Cath takes us through her journey towards setting up a commune in the north. Modelled on the egalitarian eco-village Twin Oaks, Cath's goal is to set up a self-sufficient, autonomous, resilient community in the north of England, flying the flag for the creation of not just one commune, but a whole network of them. Cath shares her ideas with us in a fascinating discussion of all things community. Hello, and welcome to the most recent Diggers and Dreamers podcast. So, our guest today is Cath Muller, who is a prolific communard. And because of that, I'm going to allow Cath to introduce herself. So, Cath, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, prolific communard. Hilarious. That sounds like I've been in loads and loads of communes. I've actually mostly lived in Cornerstone Housing Co-op for nearly my entire adult life. But it's a member of Radical Roots, the UK network of radical housing worker co-ops, and it does mean that I've been in touch with an awful lot of communities over the years and visited a lot of communities and helped various ones get through difficult times or help them start up. Visited a lot, yeah.
Yeah, so that's in Leeds, in my version of the north of England.
Yes, that's right. Yes, since 1993.
And so one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on our podcast is because we've heard through this rumour that you are setting up something called a commune in the north.
Yeah, more than a rumour by now, I hope. Yes, this is true. It's exciting. So the idea of it is to create a commune, an egalitarian income and wealth sharing unit of people of between 100 and 200 people, and we're in the north of England.
So that's an amazing idea, Cath. Do you want to give us an idea of where that idea came from? Like, how did you get to that point?
So I think, so I've been living in Cornerstone for an awful long time, and I've been familiar with lots and lots of small housing co-ops, and by small I mean between 6 and 20 people. And I was aware of them often being quite transient communities. The people in them tend to move on. And I was aware of my own community having been started as quite a political project, and moving from a sort of coherent political project with I guess aims that it was trying to further or progress, to being more of like, this is a nice place to live and be political, even if all of our ideas are completely different and we're not working together and collectively not trying to achieve anything other than being nice to each other. And I had been feeling quite kind of stuck. People I'd been politically aligned with in previous decades had moved away or weren't so close, and I felt a bit sort of rudderless and a bit lacking in aims or focuses. So one of the things I decided to do, I don't know if I thought about it this clearly at the time, but in retrospect it looks this way, was to go on a trip. In fact, that's not at all how it started. I was also involved in the Worker Co-op Council of Co-ops UK, because I see cooperatives as tools that can be used to build a solidarity or egalitarian economy. So not necessarily, I mean, cooperatives aren't inherently anti-capitalist or inherently anarchist or anything, but they certainly can be used in those ways to achieve those purposes. But I was, again, becoming sort of somewhat stuck that my worker co-op also was not really the worker co-ops in Radical Roots had dwindled and dwindled. There were very few of us left. We seem to have lost a radical kind of economic agenda. And at the time, the worker co-ops in Co-ops UK were sort of looking for a bit more coherence themselves as well. And I had heard about, I'd heard a few things. I'd heard about the Worker Co-op Federation in the States having a peer network of advisors. So I've been working as an advisor, but you always needed to be part of a group and someone needed to find some funding somehow to pay you, which obviously is not like the Radical Roots ethos at all, which is a mutual aid network. But within Radical Roots, people who felt confident to give advice also seemed to be dwindling. I don't know if that's true. Generational. It didn't feel like there were confident advisors coming through. And in the worker co-op world as well, co-op advisors generally were getting older as a cohort. And so I heard about this thing in the States where they had developed a peer network of advisors. And my first thought was, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there and talk to them. And if I'm going to go there, because I don't fly, I better sail, and I better probably make it a bit of a trip of it, because I don't want to just sail over there for a weekend and sail back again. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I decided to sort of go on this tour of the States, visiting what I termed economic projects. What did I call it? Economic projects that were anti-capitalist or anarchist in some way, that were looking at ways of trading that were outside fiat currency, looking at ways of organising that were anarchistic or egalitarian, even if not by consensus. And, like businesses that were coping with trying to be a political project while surviving. So I visited a lot of places, and naturally on a shoestring, and coming from a communities background, I would really always try and find the community to stay in, because that was both the cheapest and the most fun and interesting option. And I stayed pretty much within a week and a half of arriving on the US mainland. I stayed at Twin Oaks, which I had heard of but sort of forgotten about somewhere along the line. And I found them online. I was like, "Oh, I'm passing you. Shall I come and visit?" Which I did.
You're kidding. Twin Oaks was an accidental stumbling on thing.
I mean, I know that sounds strange. I had heard of Twin Oaks, but it was years ago, and I was sort of out of the Communes remembering of why things are interesting. But yeah, so when I read about them online, and I was like, "Oh, you're en route, brilliant! I'll come and visit you." And they were like, "Yep, we can pick you up, no problem." And I got there, and to be honest, the whole trip over had taken months longer than I thought, and I'd had very little time to plan anything, and was feeling extremely precarious. And I kind of lost my sanity in the Caribbean. So arriving in a place where suddenly it was familiar to me, it had rules written on the walls. This is how you behave at dinner time. This is what we need from you. This is what you can get from us. And I was suddenly like, oh God, these are my people. I understand how to operate here. So that was good for a start. And then
it sounds like arriving in some sort of sanctuary. That's
it. Absolutely was. Oh my God, it absolutely was, really. And meeting my people again, and people who knew what I was talking about, who were interested in specific aspects of what I do rather than the sort of weird general idea, was great. So yeah, I breathed a huge sigh of relief, and I was only there for about 4 days. In fact, it was only planned to be 2, but I couldn't rid myself away. But then I came back again for another couple of weeks as I was starting my clockwise journey of North America, and then I went again a few months later for the communities gathering for a long weekend. So in total, I spent quite a few weeks there. And there were a lot of things that landed with me when I was there. The thing that I always start with for some reason, I'm not sure this was the most significant thing at the time, but it did quite strike me, was people saying how, you know, people who'd been there a couple of years and they knew other people who'd been there for years and years and weren't talking to each other. And they thought that wasn't really on. They thought that's not okay. They should put some effort into it. But my reaction was, wow, they can just carry on living where they live without their whole community falling apart, or they have to leave their home. Because my experience of people falling out in small co-ops is it's not possible for people to, you know, for both conflictual parties to stay there. So that actually really hit me. I thought, that's about scale, because you can't do that when it's small.
Yeah. You can have people, not in a horrible way, but in a kind of I'm just not going to inhabit their space. I'm gonna still be part of this amazing project. I'm just gonna kind of have some space between me and this other person. Yeah, it's really good.
And particularly if you think about the size, I would say Twin Oaks is about 100 people, and we're aiming for more, which was based on my experience there. But you wouldn't expect in a you know, no matter how politically aligned, you wouldn't expect to get on well with everybody in that size of group of people. So yeah, there are a few things that landed with me there about, okay, this is, well, that they've been going for 50 years and they were stable. And that seemed to me to be fantastic. Just their income sharing, and and I've seen community after community, especially, well, all over the place, move from a sort of radical behaviour to a more mainstream behaviour. That's inevitably what happens as with generational change and with society changing around you. And there were obviously a few factors to this, and probably one is being a bit remote from society, but it's not the main one. The main one was it's just more convenient for them to carry on doing the collective thing. If you want to do something that's a bit more individualistic, it's much less convenient. Mm-hmm. So people just don't do it. And that comes from the behaviourist underpinnings, which is set it up in a certain way and people will behave in a certain way.
Some of that's also the way it's structured, is that everything is kind of structured. Because I've read quite a lot about Twin Oaks. I'm absolutely fascinated. I really would like to go and visit, but like you, I can't bear to think about. I just hate flying. I'm not even taking an environmental slant. I would just cry all the way. But it's if everything is geared towards that collective, then actually doing, as you say, doing something as an individual is harder. Then you are leaning towards the collective all the time. So it's about you saying that's about the design of the community.
I think so, very much. Yeah. Yes. And there must also be something about the decision-making and organisationalness of it. So it's big, so it's going to be slow. It's big, so there's going to be a cultural critical mass that makes it harder for incomers to change things that they don't like. And also because it's not everything by consensus, actually there's an amount of flexibility within little areas of management where they can kind of do what they like in more of a way. So little groups and management bits can change, while sort of collective sort of whole group behaviour doesn't change so much. And there are things there that are ridiculously bureaucratic.
Do they still do the timesheets?
Well, I don't know if they still do, but they were then. They were in 2018, they were doing it. And I couldn't imagine. So that took 2 people 2 days a week, which actually is really, really fast given what they were doing. They were, allocating each individual person their whole week's worth of different tasks, domestic and commercial and food growing and so on. And then giving everybody time to come back and say, oh, I can't do that shift. I can't do this. Can you swap me around? So they had, it's just really a lot, a whole 2 days of allocation and then another day of switching everything around. And for 100 people, I just thought, obviously the 2 women who did it just knew the system very well, knew the individuals well enough, knew what the managers needed. They really understood everything. And I thought, I can see this working because you're you in this place. And it was reasonably clear that a lot of people thought that was overly bureaucratic. And if anyone could have thought of some way of making it less bureaucratic, I'm sure they would have done. I mean, also tons of paper, because they would produce 100 timesheets for the people and then put sets of those packs of 100 timesheets in various places around the 400-acre site so that you could go and see where somebody's supposed to be, you know. So none of it was digitized. And I can't imagine setting that up now. I can, because someone could come over and teach us, but I can't imagine.
So what point in all of that did you kind of go, oh my God, this is it? Or did you actually go, oh, this could be something I could really take, you know, and translate into a British context?
It's hard for me to remember exactly when I thought that, and I suspect it's not till I was coming back, because all the time I was travelling, I was seeing new things. So I was really quite fully engaged, and like in the moment wherever I was. But I was lucky enough in quite a few places to be giving talks about where I had come from and what I was doing. So I guess I kind of fermented some ideas while I was doing those talks and discussion with people. But I do remember that I got back in late October, and I'm pretty sure by November I was thinking, I want to set that up. And things that I said to people at the time were, well, you can live there and never think about money. And hence my whole kind of the explicit focus of my trip was, how can we work outside fiat currency? Can we work outside the money system? Because the system of money keeps us tied to capitalism. Can we work outside of it at all? So that being in a place where lots of people just never thought about it much, you know, all of their needs were met without having to have any, was just so mind-blowing. Was it mind-blowing? I don't know. I feel like I've come home, so it just felt right. And then afterwards, you know, when you say it out loud, you're like, it's this thing that I always thought would be some kind of fantasy sci-fi place really exists.
And not just don't really exist, has existed for a significant period of time. You know, it's kind of like it's not a flash in the pan. I know when I read about it, so obviously not firsthand, but I do remember kind of going, that's pretty amazing. I mean, obviously they do run a business. It is a business, you know, so it does have it's almost like a sort of a double loop system in a way, isn't it? So they run their business where they do sell products. I think it's hammocks, to the outside world, and then they have their kind of internal economy, which is based on labour credits and various other things. Just for people who might not be familiar with that.
Well, yes, and I would use economy in the loosest sense, because they use the definition of economy as the arrangement of resource allocation. I would say that's all it is. It's not, you know, you agree how many hours you're going to work, and they, you know, it's noted and it's displayed how many hours you've worked overtime and how many hours you haven't yet worked and should have done. And that's quite interesting, but there's no correlation between what you need personally and how much you've worked personally at all. It's a needs-based system.
And they have a health system as well, if I remember rightly. I'm fairly confident.
I mean, they had certainly a couple of sort of, I'm going to call them intensive care, but I don't mean that, like high, some far more comfortable living units with air conditioning and hoists and accessible toilets and bars. And
Yeah, no, I was more thinking about the system allows for people to accrue medical, like in America, people pay for their medical care, that there's some of that has been factored in, I understand. But what I think would probably be useful is if we put a link in underneath this particular podcast so people can go read more details if they want to. So you saw Finn out, she went, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So how is that then translated into a commune in the north?
Well, I guess the other thing was it was secular, because I've come across quite a lot of similar communities which are religious, but I hadn't come across any functioning communities at that scale in the English-speaking world, to be fair, which was secular. So, so how did that translate? Well, I guess I came back here. I'd been away for a year. There were lots of things I wanted to do, but I also knew I had to get some money, so there were sort of things put on hold. But yeah, I did come back thinking something needs to be done about the climate crisis, something needs to be done about alternative kind of spheres, and I'm going to set up a commune. That's what I'll focus on, those three things.
just a couple of small items on your list.
I think climate hubs were starting to be set up, and I was like, why don't we just get a room and just get some monitors and link them up to some data, and we'll just make them co-working spaces.
Yeah.
DIY. It didn't quite work out. It could have done. Actually really easily. What was the other thing? Faircoin. Yeah, the alternative cryptocurrency that was a co-op. I really thought we need to get that in the UK so that we can have access to trading capacity with other people without doing it through fiat currency. But again, much harder than you would have thought. And the commune, really, once I thought, okay, that has to happen just because it can, and because that's where I want to live. I have no kids. I don't think I have a pension of any kind. I've been unemployed or low paid my whole life. So, the future, if I get sick, the future looks a bit scary for me. So there's both this kind of political push. There's also the future looks scary for society in general in terms of the rise of the right, in terms of vulnerable supply chains, in terms of vulnerable care services of all kinds, and I want to say social services, but I mean roads and infrastructure and everything. So
yeah, it's a little bit like the social contract that we engage ourselves in, sort of, in terms of I will contribute to this system, but this system will also provide me with the basic things I need, is kind of breaking down.
That's true, but if you look at it in an even longer and anarchistic or eco timescale, it hasn't ever worked except for a few people. And we're lucky in this country; it works for most of us in this country, or it did. But that was at the expense of animals and people in other parts of the world, and the landscape and our climate. It's expensive everything. So, whichever level you want to take it at, my own personal future, society's future, the world, climate change, fairness in general, all of those things. It seemed like creating a power base, effectively, autonomy, resilience, being able to meet our needs in a way that was fair and accessible to everybody. Anybody can come, and as long as they can contribute something in terms of time, then, the system will meet their needs. Our little system that we agree together that we have agency over will collectively meet our collective needs. And hopefully we'll be able to survive in a quite scary environment. And not only that, but if we are producing at enough scale for ourselves, and presumably in a sort of low impact way as possible, because there'll be lots of hands that don't need to be paid minimum wage, then we can also produce for people around us. So Twin Oaks did also have, I think it still has, a tofu factory. And it doesn't grow soybeans. They buy their soybeans from local organic farmers or even regional. I don't know how far away their soybeans come from. And then they supply them across the eastern seaboard. And I did think one name for our commune could be Abundant Tofu, but it didn't go down very well with the rest of the other. But yeah, if we are saying, okay, what do we need? We need all of these different kinds of foods. We can't actually grow all of these different kinds of foods, but we can make a business out of ferments and pickles or microgreens or tempeh and tofu or, whatever it is that we need. And thinking along similar lines, if we are going to be providing care for ourselves and our elders when we're need it, or if we are providing forest schooling for our own children, then it makes sense to make those into, make them accessible to wider, possibly paying customers. So if our businesses are in things that we need, then hopefully we'll be doing them anyway. It won't detract from our mission. And also it means we hopefully will also be doing it to a good standard.
I am constantly in awe of the fact that intentional communities in general try really, really put the mind work in terms of trying to think about how they can solve things that we as a larger society quite often haven't, things like elder care, intergenerational justice, distribution of wealth, all of those things. And I'm always really quite in awe of that, actually. And I think, have conversations with Jonathan and some of the others in Diggers and Dreamers about this idea that communities are the sort of the hubs or the brain. They're doing a lot of the thinking about how we might live in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But also, there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn from other parts of the world in the present and also from the past. It feels like society has gone down such a bizarre alienation pathway of separating everybody from each other, separating people's knowledge from other people, separating people's care from other people, and making everyone depend on money and a system, which is just weird. Like, why would you do that? It only benefits the people who can extract money from it. It doesn't benefit anybody else in it, really. That might be a bit of a broad brush critique, but it feels like we have this isn't even true. I was going to say many people seem quite happy to give up their power and give up their responsibility. But I think it's also reasonable to say that power and agency has been violently ripped from communities over the years, over the centuries.
So to the point where people are unaware that they could have that potential, they potentially could be taking that back. I absolutely see what you're saying.
Yeah. So
all of these ideas are kind of coming together under one roof, as it were, for you.
Yes, very much. Very much. And I was just in the chatting before we started. The reason it's called a commune in the north and not the commune in the north is because I really hope there'll be more. In answer to the question, what do we need? And the answer being more than we can possibly make ourselves. Then, the extended answer is then we need lots of communes, don't we? So hopefully that's where this will go and will inspire other people. But yes, and also I think we want to create fairly resilient local supply chains and within and around the communities where we situate ourselves. And you were saying about sort of distribution of wealth, and it occurs to me that it's incredibly complicated. In the radical left now, especially younger people, lots of people are looking at how to more fairly redistribute wealth between themselves. And I think that's very complicated prickly, thorny, difficult. Whereas with the Commune in the north, you don't have to worry about it. That's fine. It's all collective. Everyone's got the same. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So you have land, you have buildings, where are you in your...
Where are we?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. So we started meeting at the end of 2020, in the middle of COVID, and there were about 6 or 7 of us by the time we had our first face-to-face meeting in May 2021. Gosh, that seems a long time. It can't have been. Yeah, no, it really was. May 2021. And one of the people who'd become a communard by that point was a guy called Warren Draper, who had been part of the crew who set up a community garden in Doncaster called Bentley Urban Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sort of the last person standing on it by the time it got to the end of COVID, and had always wanted to be in a commune. So he was very keen that the commune should become in physical form rather than dotted around the country in Bentley, and use the farm itself as a place to nursery our skills, our ideas, our culture, our routines of working together, or, that we could start being the commune there, which we all thought was a good idea, really. Bentley's an old mining town. It's in Doncaster. The whole area is mining country, really. So it's exactly the kind of the communities that we were looking to situate ourselves in. So that's where we currently are, still nurturing ourselves.
Sorry to dig a little, but is it collectively owned? Are you kind of are you thinking, how does that work?
So 2 of us moved there initially and we're renting. A third person joined us in the rented house.
Mm-hmm.
A fourth person was going to move at some point, and then they moved and stayed on the farm for the summer. And then the one of us who had a house and a properly paying job sold her house and bought a house in Bentley, which was enough room, together with a sort of borrowed truck on the driveway for 7 people to move into. So those of us who were already in Bentley, which was the 3 arrivals, the person staying on the farm and Warren, and then 3 other people who had turned up for our gathering that weekend, all moved into the house in September 23. So that house is still in that person's name and is waiting to be transferred. And we haven't yet decided whether we're transferring it into a commune in the north, which is set up as a worker co-op. We've also registered a housing co-op called Good Intentions, which reflects the reality and various dire possible futures and hopes and dreams.
That's an incredible commitment for one person to make, isn't it? To kind of go, I am absolutely in here. I'm going to throw my lot in with you. I'm going to turn potentially my assets into a collective entity, and I'm in. I guess one of the questions I was going to ask you was, did you think that you're using an American model, or at least you're drawing from an American model, but British are notoriously kind of a bit different from the Americans in terms of their, I don't know, can-do entrepreneurial type of businessy end of stuff. Do you think we've got what it takes, Cath?
I guess if I said I wasn't sure, that would be a bit demoralising. I mean, you have to imagine that we're going to do it. I mean, I have a lot of friends who've been involved in setting up co-housing projects around the country, and they take at least a decade in most cases, and they get in, and then there's even more work, and it's more work, and it's more work. And that's what you take on when you think, I'm going to start this big thing that's probably going to involve building more buildings on land, which who knows whether we can get planning permission for residential, agricultural and light industrial all on the same site. Seems unlikely, but let's just assume we're going to be able to and move ahead as if we will. I assume it'll take 10 years. I would optimistically was thinking sort of maybe 7. But yes, I mean, the strategy is to get 30 people, I guess, to move to Bentley and get our businesses up and running, get some kind of reliable income, because completely arbitrarily picking 30, I don't really know where it came from. When we've got 30, what I reckon is we'll have enough people to take on a larger site that we will have to probably buy and pay for using the income from our reliable business and all of the labour amount available from 30 people. I'm trying to remember what your question was before. I think it was around the levels of commitment. Oh, yeah. So the person who did that in our commune, her point of view is also she doesn't have kids. Her parents very well off, but she also saw them get old and lonely-ish, and being on their own and finding it difficult. One of them looking after the other one, and after that, they had quite a lot of money because they could have lost quite a lot of it in medical bills or home care bills or whatever, one way or another. And she was like, "Well, I don't have that much money, and I'm really on my own, and I'm just not enjoying it. Why would I not want to?" live with a bunch of people as chosen family when the future looks so scary, regardless of my own personal situation, the future looks scary. Why would I not want to face that with friends in a place where we're going to eat organic food every day? And, it sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, no, it does. It sounds amazing. So are you busy? Are you growing? Are you doing
We are busy.
Oh, are you
we are busy. The community garden is owned by the council, and we currently are not paying any rent on it. And I imagine that could change, in which case suddenly everything will change. We'll have to start looking for funding, at least, if not trying to start making money out of what we're growing. It's very community garden-y vibes. It's creative, it's holistic, it's a little bit floaty, it's lots of fun. I wouldn't say it was the most productive place ever. It's not hard-nosed at all. And all of that, none of us are paid to work here, and only one of us has got growing skills over any time. So yes, we're spending some time growing and learning to grow. We're spending quite a lot of time on getting the house that we've bought to be insulated and fixed and damp-proof. We're about to buy another house, and that will take more time as well. We're spending a lot of time in meetings, unsurprisingly. We're spending a lot of time getting to know each other. We're spending an awful lot of time developing policies around communication and conflict and self-development, because none of us are socialized to live like this. We're not socialized to live in peer groups. We're not socialized to think of ourselves in a collective way. We tend to put our own needs first, when that's not necessarily helpful at all.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of unlearning to do. And again, people in the sort of young, more radical left will be familiar with unlearning racism or unlearning sexism or whatever, but we're doing all of that, and we're also unlearning individualism and unlearning internalized capitalism and so on and so on.
I love it.
That's kind of an important part, and we're doing a lot of political education as well. We're doing book readings together. We're hosting events. We run learnings for people who are interested in the commune weekly, every Tuesday, both online and it's a long story, but at our local skate park, which we're connected with now. And those are attracting people. We run quarterly gatherings where people who are interested join us for a weekend of discussion and working together on the farm, and morale boosting around the campfire, sing-alongs and story-alongs and games. And we really are trying to so that the time that's going into developing our principles and our culture is thinking and doing.
Sounds incredibly busy, Cath. Incredibly busy.
It is. It's both. It's very inspiring. I think, because more people keep visiting us and more people keep contacting us. And we might be delivering the same curriculum every sort of 10 or 11 weeks. But quite a lot of people are going to the same learnings twice or three times, but they're different every time because there's different people in them, or we've learned something, or other people are bringing new things to the table. And at our quarterly gatherings also, we'll often present, this is our new piece of policy that's been drafted. What do you think about it? We'll get critique, we'll get input, and then we'll kind of go away and reformulate some stuff. So that we're feeling quite, I would say, held by a wider network of friends, many of whom are new friends. They have come across the Commune and they are excited by it. And I think that in it, feeling other people's excitement is what kind of reignites the excitement for us in the day-to-day of like, gosh, we're doing a lot, isn't it tiring? And then more people come along and are excited again, and then we're excited again.
This feels like a really good moment to ask you, kind of like, what are your key, I know you're kind of not even midway, you are knee deep in this journey of this new commune, which is just really inspiring. But what are your kind of key takeaways, or what have you learned, or what have you gained in terms of your journey so far?
I think we are really leaning into wanting to develop a culture of storytelling and music and oral tradition and art, and creating our culture in words and pictures around us, so that when you walk into a space or are in a group of people, you see it and you feel it, and it's not new. This is something that many groups have done it before. All faiths have done it. If you go into any spiritual place of worship, there are signs and verses and posters and everything everywhere, and the art is about the story. And the Nazis did it. I mean, to draw comparisons, they did it very, very successfully. They infiltrated every area of society, didn't they, and cultural life. So, like, you have to see how it works and what people respond to. It feels a bit like, okay, well, it's kind of crazy of us to ignore the lessons of marketing and advertising and stuff and say, no, we don't want to do any of that, because like it's being done to everyone, including us, all the time by capitalism. We have to at least understand it and try and counter it in some way. And some of that countering will be, well, let's just replace time spent on your screen looking at adverts with time spent around the fire. Or, if we're all clearing up together after dinner, it's more talking time, and it's less like leaving instructions on the wall and more like telling each other what goes where and how to wipe down.
Telling the stories of where the mugs go. And Oh, that sounds brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Cath. It's been a really fun romp through the Commune in the North. Thank you very much.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Diggers and Dreamers, the go-to place for intentional communities in Britain. As ever, it really helps us if you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget, you can find out more about communal living at our website, diggersandreamers.org.uk. There you'll find an online directory of existing communities and developing groups within the UK, plus interactive notice boards and information about our publications. One you won't want to miss is the Diggers and Dreamers directory, which has been referred to as the Communard's Bible for 35 years. And now, to play us out, here are the Spaceheads with their tribute to our old mate, Gerard Winstanley. See you next time.